Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us for our third and last installment of Engineering Your Career, brought to you by the Office of Advising and Career Services and the Physics and Pre-Engineering Department. We have with us today special guest speakers, Robert Forkner from Evergy, from the Kansas City area, who is a project manager at the transmission and substation. And we also have Cindy LePage coming to us from Jefferson City, Missouri, from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. And she is the environmental section chief for the water protection program. So thank you both for joining us today. So we'll go ahead and begin with Robert Forkner. We have his presentation pulled up here. So Robert, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. Like she said, my name is Robert Forkner. I have an engineering background, but I'm currently a transmission and substation project manager for Evergy, and most of my projects are in the kind of Kansas City metro area. Next slide, please. A little bit about myself. I have a mechanical engineering degree. I graduated from Kansas State in the fall of 2013. So I've been with Evergy for about 7 years now. Currently live in Lawrence, Kansas. And some of my hobbies include, I'm really into road biking right now as a way to get out of the house and get some exercise in, watch a lot of movies, and then trying to pick up golf as the weather gets warmer. All right, so a little bit about Evergy. So some of you may know Evergy. Hopefully everybody's heard about it. We were a merger of the Kansas City Power and Light and Westar Energy companies, which happened back in 2018. We're basically a vertically integrated electric utility. So what that means is we own the power plants, the transmission lines, the distribution equipment, and the relationship with the customer. So kind of that whole stack. And this kind of gives you a graphical representation of our service territory, which is kind of Salina, Wichita on the west side, all the way out to kind of the middle of Missouri on the east side. I don't know if the college is inside of our service territory. That may be Ameren, but I wasn't able to get a good answer on that before today. So, but the other neat thing about this map is it shows you all of our generation stations as well. So you can see we've got some coal and natural gas plants. Those are kind of the dark blue generation plants. Quite a few wind farms. We have 3 solar farms today, some landfill natural gas, which is a renewable source that we like to use where we can, and then 1 nuclear plant at Wolf Creek in Kansas. So kind of a little bit of everything. All right, just real quick, some numbers. We're about a $12.5 billion company, which puts us kind of in the mid-range for utilities across the nation. We've got about 10,000 miles of transmission lines, which is what I primarily work on these days, but about 50,000 miles of distribution line, about 15,000 megawatts of accredited generation capacity, 4,000 megawatts of renewables, and about 1.6 million customers total. So kind of middle of the pack for size on utilities in the country. That kind of gives you an idea of our size. All right, and then I threw this in here because I thought it was kind of interesting. So this is focusing on our Missouri impacts, but we like to keep involved in our community. So one of the nice things about the merger is it did give some credits back to our customers for on their power bill. So we actually have a rate kind of halt for a few years based on the savings we got from that merger. So that helps our customers out. More than 2,000 of our Missouri employees pledged about $2 million to nonprofit organizations in the state. And we have a program where the company matches dollar for dollar what our employees donate. So that's a really good program. And then we pledged about $2.2 million in COVID relief fund for the state of Missouri as well. So we're really interested in being involved in our local communities and giving back where we can. All right, so a little bit about my job history. I actually started as an intern in the summer of 2013 for the company. Had a little bit of a unique internship in that I didn't really do any engineering. I actually worked for our chief operating officer. And my job for the summer was to go around and basically learn as much as I could about how an electric utility operates and kind of just get a handle on the whole operation. It was a lot of fun. I didn't provide much value to the company, but I learned quite a lot about utilities. That led to a job offer in our plant support engineering group. And as a plant support engineer, I basically got to spec and build projects out in the field. So some of these pictures here are some projects I've done over the years. The one on the far left, we call that the giant swimming pool. It was a big concrete tank. It was about 25 feet deep, and it was about 100 yards long and about 40 yards wide, almost exactly the same size as a football field. And basically what we used it for was settling out wastewater from the power plant. So part of the new environmental rules, got to go out and build that. And it was just a massive project, quite a bit of fun. In the middle, there's a boiler, which is the kind of the first and only project I did the full engineering on. So I went out and figured out how big this boiler needed to be, what kind of size and specifications we needed for it, and then went out and ordered that from a company and actually hired a company to install it. And then on the right is a project I did to rebuild and repair a steam turbine. So just a giant piece of rotating machinery that's actually from the Lawrence Unit 5 power plant. Every about 9 years or so, you got to take them completely apart, fix anything that's wrong, replace any parts that need to be replaced, and then put them back together. So I did that for about 3 years. And then in 2016, I took a job at our wind farms, which is the next slide, please, Michelle.
Okay, sure.
All right. So from 2016 to 2019, I was actually a site manager down for one of our wind farms in Western Kansas. So I moved out to Dodge City, which was kind of a change for me. Hadn't ever lived kind of that far out there before, but I got to do quite a bit of really interesting work. So we built a brand new wind farm with 122 wind turbines. That's kind of the picture you see there on the left. So I was the project manager for that, which was about a $400 million project. So it was quite a large project for me being so young in my career. But it went very well, and it was a great learning experience for me. So I got to go out and build the wind farm, and then I got to stay and actually hire the employees that worked there and kind of manage the 0 to 100% us maintaining it. So, after we got it built, we didn't have any employees, we didn't have any maintenance practices. This was kind of the first one we've ever done. So I actually got to go through with a few folks that I hired and kind of just come up with all that. How are we going to maintain these things? What does that look like? It was kind of 2 years of just trial and error, figuring out what worked, going through all of that. So it was a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience. I actually got to go through the full process of hiring employees. Luckily, didn't have to fire anybody while I was down there, but it was just it was a change from the engineering into more of the management. And then in 2019, I took a job up in Lawrence, and it'll be the next slide, Michelle, please. Took a job up in Lawrence doing solar primarily. So still had a little bit of the wind farm projects I was helping out on, but came back to the northeast part of the state and actually started to plan and hire companies to design solar projects for the company. So this is a 1 megawatt solar farm that we built in Baldwin City, which is just south of Lawrence. And it was kind of a continuation of the things I had done previously in the company, which was, speccing, hiring contractors, writing scopes of work, and actually supervising construction out in the field. But now I got to do it for solar instead of for wind. So another fun job change for me, and another good learning experience. Did that for a little bit, and then the next slide is what I'm doing today, which is project management again, but this time for transmission and distribution systems. So I don't know what it looks like out around the college, but in a lot of the kind of KC metro area, we have a lot of the old style of lattice towers, which is what you see on the right, that may have been out in the field for 50 or 60 years and are getting towards the end of their life. So we're going around and spending money basically tearing all of those down, putting up the new state-of-the-art monopole structures, which are on the left there, which will last another 60 to 70 years and carry more capacity out on the grid, which helps with all of the kind of new wind farms, solar farms, and generation that's being put out there. So one of the things that I've been fortunate enough to experience is that there's a lot of diversity in jobs at Evergy. We have a generation group and a transmission group. I spent most of my career in generation and now get to try out the transmission side of things. But there's just quite a bit of work to do. And if you're willing to kind of jump around, there's a lot of good opportunities to learn new and interesting things. So I haven't really been tied down to one thing for more than about 3 years. But I get to learn as much as I can in those 3 years and then get to go move and carry what I've learned into a new and exciting job opportunity. All right. The last thing I was asked to talk about today is kind of tips for internships and job hunting. I've hired 3 or 4 interns throughout my career and probably close to 20 full-time employees. And for somebody that's in college, my tips for job hunting and internships is to first kind of cast your net wide and really be open to anything. So the internship I ended up with was not anywhere on my list of choices. It was kind of a unique one. I really stumbled into it, and I'm really glad that I took it. So don't just focus on one thing. Make sure you're casting that net wide and talking to many different companies and evaluating many different opportunities because you never know what may come up. The next thing is all job experience is good. So I worked at a Wendy's. I actually was a shift manager at a Wendy's in college. And that was the real reason why I got my internship. The COO at the time of the company had worked all throughout college at a Burger King and managed a Burger King for a while, and that's how he paid for his college. So we actually spent half the interview just talking about what it's like to run a fast food restaurant and things that have changed since he did it and when I was doing it. And so, it's not related to my engineering experience, not related to anything, but because the interviewer happened to be have that experience as well, we ended up talking about that for a fair amount of time. So don't be afraid to highlight some of your job experiences, even if you don't think it's not related to what you're trying to do. Extracurriculars are key. So when I look at internship resumes in particular, I may be looking at 30 or 40 of them. And a lot of times for engineering, everybody's taking the same classes and GPA matters, but I don't primarily look at the GPA when I'm quickly, going through the resumes. And what I find is that the students that have extracurricular activities tend to stand out. And those are the things that'll differentiate you from, somebody that's in all the same classes as you are, but may not have that experience. So whether that's a club, whether that's, something related to your field or not, if you're on some sort of a school sponsored activity, those kind of things are all really good, or just volunteer experience or something outside of school always helps as well. And then something for resumes, have lots of people look over your resume. If this college has a program where you can, sit in and have somebody help you coach with that, I highly encourage you to take advantage of that. And then make sure your resume is kind of up to date, spell checked, those kind of things. I like telling this story. I had a student apply to one of my internships a while back, and they had a cover letter, and the cover letter was really well written all the way through, except the first line was, I've always wanted to work at Kiewit. It's been a dream of mine since I was a kid. And I thought that was really odd because it was an Evergy internship, not a Kiewit internship. And so what they had done, I think, was copy and pasted that and just forgot to change the Kiewit to Evergy. But that really hit me as the hiring manager the wrong way, just because, if you really want to work at Kiewit, why apply at Evergy with that? So just another thing to keep in mind. And then I'll skip down to the last one here. Most importantly, be yourself. So authenticity is pretty easy to spot when you're having interactions in an interview or talking to somebody at a career fair. So if you get nervous in these types of things, you can always go and practice and do mock interviews, put yourself in sort of similar situations to get used to it. But even if you're nervous, just be yourself, be authentic, those kind of things. Because as a hiring manager, you can pick up on when somebody's being a little bit, I don't want to say cagey, or might be look like they're not telling you something the full truth, and that just kind of sticks with you in the body language and the interaction you have with the person. So be yourself, and if you do get that internship and do get hired into the company because you're a good fit, it always helps that you get to continue to act like yourself throughout your whole internship. And I think I'm coming up on time, so we can probably skip this last one, and I'll go ahead and say that the last slide on here is my contact information. So my email and actually my desk phone there. And I always put this at the end of these types of presentations. If you have questions about Evergy, about engineering, about really anything that I can help you with, please reach out. Nobody really ever takes advantage of these. I think, I've probably given my contact information out in the 20 or so presentations I've done over the past couple of years. And I think I had one person reach out to me. So take advantage of this if you're interested. I'm always happy to help where I can. So.
Thank you, Robert. I really appreciate all the work that you've done and all the information that you've shared with our students. Thank you for plugging career services. I'll do a shameless plug for us. We are here for all of the students listening. We are happy to review resumes. In fact, that's my job here in career services, is to review your resume as well as practice mock interviews. We rarely get requests for mock interviews, so whenever we get those, it's a treat. But I promise you, you won't regret practicing an interview. It kind of gets rid of those first interview nerves. You can work out how you can respond to questions, and really just talk about how to react to some of those questions. So thank you for doing that. So our next guest is Cindy LePage, and again, she's from the Missouri Natural Resources. She's the environmental section chief for the water protection program, joining us from Jefferson City, so not too far away. So Cindy, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, I have to correct you. I am the chief of the engineering section instead of environmental section.
My apologies. Okay.
No, my fault probably for not giving you the good information. But anyway, I head up the wastewater engineering group for the whole department, and what we do is review plans and specifications and proposals for wastewater treatment across the whole state. That includes sewer extensions, new wastewater treatment facilities, disinfection for those facilities. Let's see. Oh, and I wanted to piggyback on what you were saying about the mock interview, because I've done a lot of interviews, and I have hired interns also, and you can really tell someone who's gone through that mock interview. I think it's a great thing if you can go through it, especially if you're going to be applying with the state or with DNR, because DNR has a system where we have a panel, an interview panel. And so you're sitting across the table from at least 3 people who have paper and pen in hand, and they will ask you a question, and then they have to put their head down and write down what you do. And it's really unnerving if you haven't ever been in that situation before. I try to explain that it's just that we have to write everything down that they say, and that it's not a reflection of how the interview is going at all. But it's a different way of interviewing. And my first interview with the DNR was horrible. I walked out of there thinking, they are never going to hire me. I started with the DNR in 1994, and just worked briefly in hazardous waste as an engineer too. I was an engineer too, and I was reviewing plans for a transfer station for hazardous waste, where they would bring the hazardous waste, store it, and then take it to whatever facility it needed to go to, or dispose of it in some way. Then I had kids and stayed home for a long time. And when I went back to DNR, I started in wastewater. I worked for the Financial Assistance Center, which provides loans and grants for communities that need to improve the infrastructure. And then I moved over to the engineering section, which I really like. And I've been here for 13 years, worked my way up. I chose the public sector because I really wanted to serve the public. I was in, the environment was important to me. I do a lot of canoeing and camping and wanted to keep our waters clean. And I feel like DNR is important for those reasons. Our goal is to protect the waters and the resources. And we're also, let's see, what else do I want to say? I should have had a nice prepared presentation, but and the engineering section does a whole lot of things. We're actually the support for a lot of the other sections throughout DNR. We collaborate with the people who come up with the water quality standards and write those regulations. We work with the people in land reclamation. They do the mining, and that wastewater has to be treated also. So we do a lot of work with them. Hazardous waste, we do some work with them. We have to make sure there's no hazardous waste in what they're discharging to our rivers. And we work pretty closely with the drinking water group. We want to make sure that what the wastewater facilities are doing is not going to hurt the drinking water sources. Those have to be kept completely separate. Let's see. I made some notes. I'm going to put in the chat box some links, and those are links to some career opportunities at the DNR. We do hire a lot of interns, and that's not just in the engineering department. And like Robert said, any experience is great experience. Intern with the DNR, learn as much as you can. It's a great place to work. We have great benefits. The variety of work is awesome. I'm not ever stuck doing one thing all day long. There's something new every day. I learn something new every day. Sometimes that can be stressful, but it's worse to be bored in a job. It's also rewarding to know that I've had a part in protecting the water quality in Missouri, protecting the land in Missouri. We have land application also of wastewater. It's rewarding to see the progress that these facilities make. And wastewater is a subject that nobody likes to talk about. Who cares about the sewer? It's under the street. We can't see it. I flush my toilet, it's gone. But if we don't take care of that, then it's going to be bad for everyone. So it is an important field, not very glamorous, but extremely interesting. We also have a lot of facilities that want to try new technology, you know, with the water quality standards changing all the time and getting more strict, and you have to treat differently. The technology has to change also. And so we review all of that and set up demonstration projects and follow the progress that they make. So that's kind of interesting. Like I said, we're always learning something new. I don't know if I have anything else to say. The state's a great place to work. DNR's great people. We're all passionate about what we do. I do have one tip, you know, for engineers. Yes, engineering, the technical aspect is very important. That's what you learn in school. But when you get out of school, you have to be able to communicate those things to other people in a way that they can understand. So communication is really the key, more so than the technical knowledge. You can always go to a book to find the answers that you need, or somewhere, you know, mostly what engineers do is they know where to go to find the answers. But it's so important to learn the communication side of it. So that's all I have. I hope to see some of you. The links that I put in the chat, one is for the internships. We have a whole webpage on that. To apply for a job or an internship, you need to go to the Hire True site, which is the last link that I put in there. So just check it. I think that all of the interns for this summer have already been hired. We set that out like in February. We start looking for interns. I don't know if they've all been filled, so you might check and see if you're still looking for an internship. My biggest regret in school is that I did not do an internship. They're so important. They give you a step up, teach you what it's like to be in a real work situation, which is different. It's very important to get an internship, and it doesn't really matter where you do it. It's just important to have that experience.
Perfect.
Do you have any questions?
I know we did have one question while you were talking, Cindy. Are the panel interviews with the state of Missouri?
Are the what?
How long are the panel interviews with the state of Missouri?
It depends. There's usually like 10 questions that we ask. Sometimes they are 30 minutes, sometimes they're longer. It depends on how responsive the interviewee is to the questions. Yeah. The more you talk, the more we have to write down, which is good. That's how we learn about you. But it's anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, usually. An hour is a pretty long interview. Yeah. They're usually less than that.
For both of our panelists, Robert and Cindy, can you give examples of the types of interview questions you're asking of candidates? I'm sure it runs the range of tell me about yourself and some behavioral based type of questions where you have to go through the SAR method, state the situation, state the action and the outcome. Can you give us some specific examples?
I can.
Go ahead.
I was
go ahead,
say,
Robert.
Well, we have a giant kind of list that our HR group sends out, and we usually kind of come through and pick based on what the interview is for. And for internships, we like to talk about some leadership qualities as well as some technical expertise. So we may ask you, tell us about a time that you worked in a group environment and it didn't go well. What happened and how did you respond to it? Or tell us about a time that you had a failure in your life What was the story? How did you respond to that? What did you do to make it right? Kind of those types of questions.
Perfect.
And describe a project that you had a deadline that you didn't think you could meet. How did you handle that situation? You know, that it's really behavioral things.
Yeah. Okay. When you're interviewing, and please, students or listeners, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box, or else I'll just be asking all the questions here, and I want to hear from the students' perspective. But when you are interviewing a student for an internship or even somebody for a job, how important is it for them to come prepared asking you questions about the company?
That's always good. For a job, I don't know about for an internship, you know, because that's so broad typically. But those that come to interview for a job, it always looks better if they know something about the job they're applying for, what it's going to be doing, what the company does. It is important to do that research on the company ahead of time, just to be familiar with terms and that sort of thing. DNR uses a lot of acronyms.
Yeah, and I'll say something very similar. I had a boss that would love to ask questions of what the stock price of the company was, you know, kind of roughly, just to see if they would have any idea. You know, so just to see if they'd done some research, more so for the full-time positions and the internships. But it's always good. I always get more out of it when I can tell they're listening to when I describe the job and then come up with questions based on that. So again, it's kind of the back and forth there, as well as kind of understanding what that job entails. Definitely helpful.
Okay. Thomas, did you have a question?
Yeah. So for Cindy, one of my questions is, so a little bit of background, I'm a biochemistry major. So that'd be kind of where I'd be kind of like my wheelhouse would be. And we've been learning in one of my classes about bioremediation. So like kind of engineering bacteria and other chemicals that help deal with pollution and water. More often than not, it's typically oil with all the oil spills going on in the sea. Does DNR deal with those any, or have they like looked into like utilizing those by chance?
Well, we don't actually do the work. We just review and make sure that it meets regulations and isn't going to cause a bigger problem. So in wastewater, we do have some proposals that come in that want to use microbes or some similar additive for treatment, and you know, we allow that. We don't evaluate it very deeply for wastewater because there's really no in a live system. It's hard to hold all the parameters equal except for one. So it's hard to tell the scientific engineering how well it's doing. There we go. I know that they do a lot of bioremediation in the hazardous waste, in those cleanups, and probably do some in the land reclamation. I'm not as familiar with those, but I'm sure they do. We have a lot of biologists. We have a lot of chemists. We have just within the engineering section, we have chemical engineers and electrical engineers, and I'm a civil engineer. We just have all kinds of engineers, and most people that come to the DNR jump around into different media, you know, work in hazardous waste for a while, work in air pollution for a while, which is another area that we also deal with because we have incineration and that sort of thing associated with wastewater. And we also handle the concentrated animal feeding operation permits. That's a big one with us. So that has some air quality things to it. Yeah, your skills would be greatly appreciated here.
There you
Yeah.
go.
We also have a lab. We also have a lab that does all sorts of testing for all over the state.
Yeah, and I can add on to that just a little bit. We had a project for wastewater at our Jefferson Energy Center, which is on the Kansas side, where we planted a wetland to pull out heavy metals from the water instead of running it through like a processing plant. And that was very much a Evergy hired consulting firm, an engineering consulting firm, to do the heavy lifting on it. And then we built a little test pilot, ran all of that data through our version of the DNR on the Kansas side, made sure that they were happy with it, that they would approve it. And over about a 18-month time span, we built one, test piloted it, got all the data to the state and all that stuff. And then they actually approved a permit for us to use that instead of that heavy metal kind of recycling facility. We now have just a couple of giant wetlands out there instead. So we're looking into some of those more biological ways of doing this instead of just running it through a heavy metal cyclone type machine to get those contaminants out.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely something I'd be interested in working with. Either of you have internships offered in the winter, or with my proximity to Jefferson City, I could even do something during the school year. But those are cool.
Yeah,
So,
no, we
go ahead, Robert.
I was just gonna say, I know we typically, if we have an intern that does a summer and likes it and they're a good fit, we can bring them back while they're in school or over like a winter break. But I think those typically start with a traditional summer internship and then kind of extend from there. I don't think we're looking for people to bring in after the summer's over.
Okay. And that's actually a segue to another question I got in the chat box is for both of you, typically how many interns are needed each year?
I guess I'll go first. I think between the Kansas and Missouri side of our company, we're going to have 80 interns this summer. So I think it's been as high as 100 in the past. And traditionally, when we were two separate companies, it was around that 40 to 50 per company. So we're going to have 80 this year.
Wow. And I know Cindy said most of her internship applications end in February. What is usually the typical range for you, date range for you at Evergy?
It's pretty similar for the spring. So I think we hire close to 60 to 70% of our interns in the fall. So after kind of the fall career fair timeframe, we'll have internships open for the following summer. And then we pick up the remaining 30% kind of in that spring career fair. So I think our last round of job openings ended, I think at the end of February, or maybe it was March 15th this year.
And about Evergy too, I'm going to add on to that. How many hours a week is that for an intern?
It's 40 hours a week. Depending on where you get an internship, that might be 410s, or that might be a 580 schedule, or it may be 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Just depends on if you're at a power plant or working in one of those groups that has kind of a different schedule. But it's full-time, very similar to what you'd be doing if you were a full-time employee for the company.
Okay. And are those paid or unpaid? I'm sure the students want to know that too.
They're paid, and I believe we pay based on how far you're in school. So there's a rate for freshman, sophomore, junior, senior level internships, an hourly rate based on those. And I don't know what those are off the top of my head, but they're pretty competitive with other kind of engineering internships that you'd get in Kansas City.
Okay. We'll move to Cindy. So you said you're hiring for summer internship ends in February. So about fall applications is what you're seeing. Cindy? Oh, I think we might have a frozen screen. Not sure what's happening. Well, we'll ask some more questions here as we're rounding out the hour. We have about 8 minutes left, so we can be mindful of your 1 o'clock classes. So Robert, can you tell me generally in engineering, because I'm actually working with some alums who are struggling right now to find jobs. Can you tell me industry-wise what is going on with hiring these days now with COVID? Is there anything unusual, or are we going back to original hiring levels? What can you tell us about the industry overall?
I think in general, engineering is still something that everybody's kind of out looking for. So at Evergy, because of the merger and the staffing level changes, we're kind of not hiring as much today, but something between 40 and 60% of our workforce is scheduled to retire in the next 10 to 15 years. So we're going to need to hire to replace some of those folks. So I expect that to ramp back up over the next 5 years or so. But in general, I think a lot of the engineering firms in Kansas City have open jobs at the moment. COVID-19 didn't seem to impact Evergy's business much at all. We're still hiring our subcontractor engineering firms. We're still doing the same work we were before. I don't think the electric utility industry was affected much by it, except we all are now working from home instead of traveling out to job sites. So I think in general, engineering is still pretty big right now. I don't know about the aircraft industry and the oil industry. Those tend to fluctuate a lot more. And I had a friend that worked for Cessna for a while, and then he left and actually went to work for one of the consulting firms just to get a little bit more even pace. And I don't know how those industries are doing today.
And that answers my question, because my alum really wanted to work at Boeing. That's one of his target companies. So that answers that question.
Yeah, that's tough these days. The friend that I had that went to work for Cessna, he enjoyed it, but it wasn't quite what he was expecting, just from the work that he was doing. But about a few months after he left the company, which this was 2 or 3 years ago, they had a big downturn and laid off a bunch of their engineering staff, and then they had another upswing and hired a bunch more. So that seems to be much more cyclical than at least the energy industry is.
Gotcha. Perfect. Before we wrap up in these last 5 minutes, hopefully Cindy can rejoin us. Well, I'm not sure what's going on here. Do you have any job search tips, networking tips for our students that you can share? You already talked about, what to have on your resume and part of the interview process, but the job search tips in general.
Sure. So right now, networking is kind of more difficult just because we're all kind of stuck at home. But one of the things that I've noticed is we had a bunch of internship virtual events where for an hour, usually in the evening, we'd have an Evergy engineer and an HR person and a business person and an accountant, kind of all together answering questions. And I noticed this spring we were getting 1 to 2 students per session. So very different from a career fair where if I go and stand there for 4 hours, I might talk to 20 students or 30 students myself, and there'd be, several other people there talking to students as well. So I would recommend that, especially right now, if you were looking out for networking, to find companies that are doing that type of maybe virtual information sessions or things like that and go to those, because you're going to get your name out there. People are going to remember who you are. They may take a quick note saying, hey, this person was asking great questions. And that's one way to get your face and name in front of companies. And when we go back to normal, it would just be kind of leverage whatever contacts you can get. If somebody comes and gives a presentation, you can always reach out in an email afterwards, ask questions, express interest that way. Talk to people at career fairs. Even if you're not looking to hire at the time, you can always go and talk to people, especially during the more slow parts of the career fair. It tends to kind of get boring for us if there's nobody to talk to. So, and then work with, your on-campus people that can help, people like Michelle. They may have contacts at companies or, events that you might be able to go to, like those internship events, virtual events, those kind of things. So I would just kind of recommend doing everything you can to get your name and face out there for those kind of things.
Thank you. And Thomas, you have another question?
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. So in terms of education, I'm specifically a biochemistry major. I have a minor in pre-engineering, and I'm looking at going to Missouri S&T to get my master's in biochemical engineering. How imperative is it to get that master's, or is it more important to get the internships? Like if I hypothetically didn't get accepted the first time applying to the master's program.
It's a good question, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to answer very well for the chemistry degree. In engineering in general, master's degrees and PhDs tend to help when you're going for something very specific. So that would be going to work for your Burns and Mac, Black and Veatch type consulting firms, and you want to be the go-to person for that one topic. I did not get my master's in engineering because that's not really what I wanted to do, and I wasn't going to benefit a lot from that process. For the chemistry side of things, I'm not sure. I've got an uncle that's got his PhD in chemistry, and he works for a company down in Texas. That one might be one where the master's degree is very helpful. I would recommend finding somebody that has something similar to what you're looking for and asking them, because I don't know that I'm going to be able to provide a very good answer. But the internships are definitely important. And if you don't get into your master's the first time around, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting a paid internship, or even a co-op that goes from summer to January 1st or something, and doing that in the meantime.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Any questions from our professors, Pong or Laura, before we depart? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Robert, for joining us. It looks like Cindy had to step out a little bit. It might have been she just had a poor connection, at home. But as just a reminder, this session is recorded, so I will be sending this out to Laura and Pam to share with all of the students who maybe couldn't make it today. Robert, do we have permission to share your PowerPoint?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, you can share that with whoever would like to have a copy of it.
Perfect. We'll send that along, and we'll keep it for our records as well. Robert, I know that Mandy and I have spoken to, and we would love to invite you to campus somehow whenever those barriers are lifted on campus. It's not our decision to make, it's administration, but we'd love to have you here on campus at some point. So thank you again for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming this afternoon, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye.